friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 23 of my 2021 holiday card series. Today I'm going to be making a card combining a whole bunch of Lawn Fawn sets, including Scent with Love, Christmas Dreams, Bah Humbug, Ho Ho Holidays, and A Creature Was Stirring. I've stamped my images out with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock, and I'm going to be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm going to start with those sweet little skunks, and for them I'm using T3, T5, and T7. I'm going to start with that T7 and do some shading on this little guy, adding it mainly down the back of his body and the underside of his arm and tail. Since he's facing toward the right, I want to keep my shadows on the left, as this is going to be kind of like a central light source on today's card. And then I'm going to come in with that T5 and begin to pull that color out. I'm still sticking pretty close to the edges for both my shadows and my mid-tone because I don't want them to get too dark, especially because they are black skunks. If you make the area over their face too dark, it makes it really hard to see their features. And their expressions are drawn so sweetly that I really don't want those to get lost. I think that's what makes the image, is those cute little facial expressions. So I'm going to fill in all the rest of that white space with that T3, working over the edge of the T5 so I get a nice smooth blend. But I will also be doing a second layer of all of my images off screen. So there you can see that he is a little bit smoother and a little bit darker. That's what that second layer does. It just increases that saturation, gives it a little bit more depth, and it also makes the coloring a little bit more smooth because that paper is nice and saturated and those markers blend even better. So now I'm going to move on to Mrs. Skunk. In my little scene, she is going to be Mrs. Skunk and he will be Mr. Skunk, and they are going to be newlyweds and exchanging their Christmas gifts for their first Christmas together. I always like to tell a little story with my cards, even if it's just in my head, and I thought this would be a cute one for these little guys. So I'm going to finish blending her out with that T3. Again, just using those little scribble motions to really break up the edge of the T5 so that everything blends nicely together. There is quite a bit of difference between the T3 and the T5, so I feel like that little extra effort is really worth it. And then I did my second layer on her, and then I wanted to tie that black in somewhere else, so I decided to do the little candle holders. Maybe they're cast iron or something like that, so they have that black tone to them. And then I'm going to move on to the lighter parts of their bodies, and for that I'm going to use T0 and T1. Just using a little bit of that T1 to add some shading where I think it should go, where the tails are joining their bodies and also where they're curved down away from the light, a little bit on their chest area right under their heads, and then on the back of their head and ears, and a little bit on the bridge of their nose since that is turned down as well. And then I blended that out with the T0 and let that fade into the white cardstock. Then I'm going to add in the T3 to this combo and do the fireplace. And I wanted it to look like stone, so I'm not going to blend it out completely. I want it to have a little bit more of a textured look. So I'm starting with that T3 and adding some shading on the right hand side of the bricks on the right and on the left hand side of the bricks on the left. And then that one in the center, I added it to both sides. And then I'm going to blend that out with the T1. But like I said, I'm not working over that like I would if I wanted something to be fluffy and smooth like the skunk's fur. I'm just adding it kind of roughly to keep that texture there. So I'm using the T0 and leaving even a little bit of white cardstock showing in each of those little blocks. And then for the bottom and the top part right below the mantelpiece, I'm going to take away the T0 and add in the T5. So I'll color with the T5 first and blend toward the center with the T3, which is going to be the mid-tone. And then right below and above that fire is where there would be the most light. So I'm using the T1 for that. And then I also wanted to color in the inside of the fireplace. So I'm using that T5 on the outer edges and keeping it lightest around where that flame is. So I'm blending that out with the T3 once again, and then all of the rest of the space around that flame is going to be filled in with the T1. Next, I'm going to bring in some pinks to give them some little pink noses and also the insides of their ears and some rosy cheeks. So I used R11 and R20 for their ears, just the R20 for their noses, and then I'm using that R20 to lay in some initial color for their cheeks, and that kind of pushes that black away, and then I added a touch of the R24 to darken that up. For the tree, I wanted some dark greens because I wanted a lot of rich dark colors in this scene. So I went with G03, G09, and G29. And I'm coloring each section in with the G29 at the top and then blending to the ornaments with the G09 and then a little G09 below the ornaments and then blending out that with the G03. So that's how I'm kind of dividing it up, and that's going to give me some nice contrast between each of those layers. So I'll get that nice shadow where the layer above is overlapping. And there is quite a bit of difference between the G09 and the G29, but I love how they look together. But I do have to do a little extra work to blend them and make them look really nice. And once again, once I get to that second layer, everything is going to get really nice and smooth. I did want to keep my color palette pretty simple for today's card and use mostly traditional Christmas colors. So once I finish up with this tree, I am going to color in a few more accessories with this combo just to have that color in little pops here and there throughout the scene. That's something I really do like to do, is to use a color in more than one place so it makes your eye travel around the scene and just take in all of those little details. So I'm going to do the leaves of the little holly berries, and those are from A Creature Was Stirring, but I just thought those would be a perfect accessory for on top of the mantle. So I'm using that G29 closest to the berries on each of those leaves, and then blending out with the G09, and then I'll have the highlight on the very ends of those leaves with the G03. And then I also wanted to do some of my little gifts with these shades. So I'm going to do one of the gifts with some green wrapping paper, and then the small gift beside it, I'm going to do a green bow. And since they're so small, I can just go ahead and color them both at once. And that way I can kind of get through them quickly, because I know there is quite a lot to color on today's card, but I just love doing scene cards with lots of things to look at, and they're just a joy to me. So I'm going to move on to the trunk of my Christmas tree, and I'm going to use E23, E25, and E27, putting my shadow up under the tree just like I did with each of the layers for the tree, and the highlight down at the bottom. I'm also going to do the log in the fireplace with these shades, also blending with the lightest color right under that flame where that would be creating some glow. And I'm going to do the top mantelpiece in wood as well. So same thing with that, just putting that darkest shade, the E27, on the outside edges, blending toward the center with the E25, and then filling in with the E23. And then I also decided to use these same browns to do the top portion of the clock, because I wanted it to look like a nice old clock that two little skunks who are living in a little burrow in the woods would have. So I just used the same shades for that. And then for the clock face, I'm going to use E40 and E41. And I'll color the base of the clock with the same shades, just using a little more of that E41 so it's a little bit darker. And then I thought that that would be a nice shade to do the white areas of the Santa hat as well. That way it's not looking too similar to the skunk's fur tone. And so I used that for the tops of the stockings. And then also use the E40 to give a little bit of shading to my candles. And I did one on the left and one on the right, since they're going to go on either side of that fireplace. And then I also did the last gift. I accidentally started with the E40, so I just went back and added a bit more of that E41 and then blended out and left a little white space at the top of the gift. And then I'm also going to do all of the little small ornaments with these two shades as well, so they will look like a little bit of a cream tone of ornaments. Then I'm going to add in my red combo, which is R24, R29, and R39. I'm going to have quite a bit of red on this scene because I think it just looks so striking with the black of the skunks. So I'm using that for the Santa hat and also for all of the little holly berries, and I just colored all of those in at once since they were little images that are quick to do. I'm also going to do all of the ribbons on the gifts that are left, so I'm just adding a little shading around that big bow on the rectangular gift, and also in the center of the bow, and then at the bottom of the bow, and a little bit where it's clustered together of the green gift, and also the smaller gift, and I added a little shadow under the lid for that one as well. And I'm going to do the stockings. So I'm also doing all of these at once since they're all grouped together. It's just quicker than switching out markers for each separate image. So started with the R39 for the darkest, blended out with the R29, and then I'm filling in with the R24. I just love this combo. I think it just looks so pretty and almost glows. And I'm also going to do the little hair bow up at the top. That is also from the Scent with Love stamp set. And I just love how Lawn Fawn's images work so well together. You can see that I have gathered images from 5 different stamp sets, but they all work so well together. They all have the right scale, so it just makes it so fun to make these scene style cards. I'm also going to do all of the rest of the ornaments on the tree, just coloring those in quickly with the shading at the bottom right and the highlight at the top left. And that is just based on where I know that that Christmas tree is going to go in this scene. And then the last thing that I'm going to color in red is the little rug. So I'm using that R39 on the outside edges, and then blending toward the center with the R29, just making sure to pull that color towards the middle there, and then filling in the rest of that with the R24. And then my last combo is going to be Y15, Y17, and YR04. I couldn't decide if I wanted to go orange for the flames in the candles and the fireplace or yellow, so I kind of did a mix. So I started with the YR04, which has a lot of yellow tone in it, and then blended out with the Y17, which leans a little bit towards the orange, and then filled in with the Y15. And that way I was also able to use those shades for the star on top of the Christmas tree. So I just shaded again with the shadows on the right hand side and the highlight on the left to match the little ornaments. I used the Y15 for the heart on the stocking, and then took my black Sakura Jelly Roll pen and went over the eye of my skunk, and then trimmed these out with their matching dies. For my focal panel, I'm going to take some ground coffee cardstock and die cut that with the largest of the large stitch rectangle stackables and the largest of the stitch dens. And that is going to create a little window into my little skunk burrow. So I'm going to set that aside, and it's going to go over some craft cardstock that I've scored and folded to a standard A2 size card, but I want to give it a little bit of dimension and make it look nice and shadowy inside. So I'm blending on some Gathered Twigs Distress Oxide ink in like a vignette pattern, with the darkest at the edges, and then leaving the center of that cardstock showing the pure craft. So I'm going to darken that up and bring it in a fair ways, since I want to be able to see it, behind that stitch den opening. So I wanted to bring that up a little bit more on the bottom and the top to just make sure that my images are nice and grounded. And then I wanted to add a little texture to it because this is supposed to be in the earth, so it's dirt. So I wanted to have some speckles. So I'm going to splatter on some more of that ink so that we have that little bit of texture. And then I also wanted to add a little bit of shimmer for the holidays. So I'm taking my Gansai Tambi Starry Colors and mixing up a gold shade and adding some splatters with that as well. And then I will set that aside to dry. Once it has, I wanted to reinforce the idea that this is in the earth. So I'm taking my E49 marker and adding some little roots that are coming in from the outside edges toward the burrow. And I wanted to get some nice organic looking shapes, so I'm holding that marker fairly loosely and just drawing those lines and allowing that marker to kind of squiggle in my hand. And I'm just drawing little forked lines and trying to vary them a bit. So some have 2 forks, some have 3. I think one even had 4. And then I'm also just doing some that are just single lines coming in there. And then I'm going to switch to my E44 marker and bring that right into the den in a few of those places. So I will just continue those lines and make it look like those roots have grown into their little space there. So once I was finished with that, I wanted to work on my sentiment, and I'm going to be white heat embossing onto a piece of chili pepper cardstock. And I'm going to make a custom sentiment from 3 different sets. I have Hava from Ho Ho Holidays, Scentimental from Scent with Love, and Christmas from A Creature Was Stirring. So I'm going to coat that paper with some powder from my powder tool and then stamp in Versamark ink. And I'm going to stamp down pretty lightly, just running my fingers over that gently and kind of pressing down a little bit if I see that any part of that sentiment isn't making contact. And then I felt like the C in Christmas wasn't quite dark enough, so I just pressed down a little bit harder on that. And then I'm going to coat that in some white embossing powder. Just make sure that that is really good and covered, and then tap on the back to remove any excess powder. And then I'm going to bring my heat tool to that and heat it up from the back first and then the front until all of that powder is nice and melted and bright white. Then I wanted to stamp on the inside of my card, so I've opened that up and I'm stamping with walnut ink. And this time I'm going to use the Hugging Skunks and the sentiment that says, "This card is sent with love." I thought that is a universal sentiment that can be used for any kind of card, and I also did the little stink marks. I've added some foam tape to the back of the outer portion, but I'm not going to adhere that down. I just want to use it for placement to get my images spaced correctly. So I'm going to be adhering everything with the glue tube, and I'm adding that little carpet down in the bottom right corner. And then I'm going to have my Christmas tree standing on that. And I wanted to be able to tuck it up under that frame, and that is why I did not adhere that frame down just yet. Then I'm going to add my fireplace, and I'm going to put it pretty high up because it's going to make it look like it's farther back in the room once I get my other images down in front. And then I'm going to add my accessories to the top of the fireplace. I started with the clock in the center, and then I'm going to add a candle on either side of that. And then I'll use those little holly berry sprigs to add a little bit of festive greenery on either side of those candlesticks. Then I'm going to take the two stockings and hang one on either side of the fireplace. I put the solid red one on the right and then the one with the little yellow heart on the left, just to pull that color toward the left side of the scene. And then I'm going to add my little skunks. And I wanted Mr. Skunk to be holding that green gift, so I made sure to tuck that under his hand while that glue was still wet. I also gave him the green gift because I wanted to pull that green shade away from the tree and just create a little bit more balance. And then I'll add Mrs. Skunk, and she's going to be holding the red gift. I did have to end up turning that a little bit because I didn't want it covering her cute little smile. The third gift is going to go under the Christmas tree just to have a little bit more interest over in that corner. And then I want to add the Santa hat to Mr. Skunk. I didn't want to cover up both of his ears, so I was trying to see how I wanted that to go. So you can just see a little sliver of his far ear showing. And then I added the little bow on Mrs. Skunk's head. And now I'm ready to add that frame onto my card. So I'm going to peel off the release papers from all of that foam tape. And then I'm going to line that up with the top of my card just to make sure that that is on there nice and straight. And then I'll press that down into place. I die cut my sentiment with one of the everyday sentiment banners, and I'm going to add some glue to the back of that, and it's going to go right down at the bottom of my scene. So I think that is really cute. Have a sentimental Christmas, and that's the best kind, don't you think? I mean, I think it works perfectly. So I'm going to add a little bit of Stardust Stickles to finish off this card because that's just something I love to do, especially on Christmas cards. You just have to have a little bit of glitter. So I added it to the flame on the candles and the fire, and also to the star on the tree. And then I'm going to add it to all of the little ornaments. I put it on all of the gift ribbons, and then also to Mrs. Skunk's little bow and Mr. Skunk's whites of his hat and the stockings. So that is going to finish up this card. I'll lift that up to the camera so you can see all of those fun details and give you another peek at the inside. This card is also going to be on the Lawn Fawn blog and YouTube channel today, so you can check it out there. I'll have a link down below. I'll also have links to all of the products I used in case you're interested in picking up anything for yourself. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Make sure you've got your notifications turned on so you don't miss any future videos. If you'd like to keep watching, here is day 23 of previous years of Holiday Card Series. So I hope you will click on those and continue watching. Thank you so much. I hope you all have an amazing day. Bye-bye.